Welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast with TJ and Sonny.
Hello and welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. My name is TJ McConaughey. I did this interview with my former professor and someone who's continued to be a mentor in my life for the last several years. And I wanted to just play that for you. I recorded this a few weeks ago, but I'm excited because this is some really awesome content. We're going to be talking about college age ministry. So we'll bypass all the segments just to do this interview for you guys this week. And I hope you guys enjoy it.
Join the conversation on Facebook and Instagram. And when you subscribe to this podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We desperately need your approval.
Hello and welcome to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. I'm really excited today because I get to interview my old college professor. Well, he's not old, but he is in my past.
Pretty old.
College professor. He is the chair of Youth and Educational Ministries at Multnomah University. And so I'm super excited, and I'd like to welcome Mr. or Dr. Rob Hildebrand.
Right, Reverend Doctor. That's
Reverend.
Very
Doctor.
Important. Yeah.
Oh man, you got 2 titles before your name. What?
My gamer
tag. Oh my
tag.
goodness.
Yeah.
It's your gamer tag.
Yeah.
Are you owning some noobs on Fortnite with that gamer
no,
tag?
No, not Fortnite so much. No, I wish.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Rob, I wanted to have you on this show because I wanted you to connect with a topic that we haven't covered on our show yet, and that is this idea of college age ministry. And college age ministry, in I think whatever context, is a difficult ministry to sort of tackle. And so I'm sure there's a lot of people who have takes on it, but I wanted to interview you for multiple reasons. First of all, you've led college age ministries at churches, and of course you're a professor, so you spent the last 10 plus years, probably 11 years now, right?
Sure, something like that.
Ministering to college age students. And so I wanted to jump right in here, Rob.
Sure.
With a question is, what is the best part of ministering to college age students?
Boy, I mean, there's a lot of great things about ministering to college students. Probably, the conversations are so deep. Like, the issues they're going through are significant. They're deciding who to marry and what to do with their life and where to go to school. And for some of them, trying to figure out, what they believe, and everything's sort of on them at that point. So the discussions you have are just so wonderful. Another one that's a little bit smaller is you don't have to babysit. Like, if you go on a retreat or if you go on a mission trip or you go to Europe, you don't have to, you can go to bed and let them go to bed whenever they want to. They're usually old enough to take care of that.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of the sort of more grown up approach to youth ministry in that way.
Yeah.
And I guess, it is kind of a different angle because, would you call this where would you put this in the church context? Is this adult ministry or is this youth ministry?
Yeah, boy, that's the big question, isn't it? I call it youth ministry, but I tend to think of those in college or young adult ministry. I think of them as adults, but it's a strange hybrid.
Yeah, and I think that probably goes to how you minister and how you relate to them, because I think if you think of them as, youth, there might be a stigma or stereotype in your own mind that would prevent you. But if you think of them adults, that probably will open up the relationship that you could have with them.
Yeah, they'll definitely prefer that. Nobody likes to be thought of as a kid for sure.
Yeah. I got middle schoolers who don't like to be thought of as kids. So, So that's cool. The next part is the follow-up question of that, which is, why is it so hard? Why do churches struggle with this? Why is it so hard to reach college age people?
Yeah, college ministries, it's got to be the hardest in my opinion of all three. Yeah. Middle school, you do something fun and you have a sleepover and everybody comes out, and back in the day, middle school, this was their social outlet. So this is the only way they could see each other, was to come out to the group. And to some extent, high school, now that's not as much anymore, but But college students don't really need the group. I mean, a lot of them have vehicles, and they can get out and do something if they have friends. Um, so I mean,
Huh.
they need the group, but they don't. Now that's not equal though. Some of them need the group more than others. The ones without established social groups, they tend to grab on a little harder. There's a bunch of things that make it hard. Like, so you kind of have a cohesive group of kids who've gone through all these grades together, and then they graduate, and the group fractures. They go all over the place, and then added on to that, some of the ones that are maybe a little more ambitious or accomplished, they go off to do something fancy, and some of the ones that are still maybe floating or wandering a little bit, they stay back. And so you kind of there's just a whole lot of elements to this, but you end up with kind of a disproportionate number of students that are maybe not quite as socially strong sometimes,
Hmm.
that need the group more than the other kids. So that plays
Huh.
with your balance a bit. Um,
Wow.
uh, yeah, and several other reasons. I mean, the other, and I don't want to go on too long, but another one is, you got students that they're grown up and they're independent, and they'd like to think that they're adults, and they are in many ways, but they don't always they haven't always had a lot of experience doing stuff, and so you tend to get a lot of folks who are kind of frustrated with the group, and they're unsatisfied with it. So you do something, and they don't like it, and they like it differently, but they don't quite know how to make that happen. So it's just an interesting kind of funky thing.
Yeah, and so, there's a lot of churches. I think almost every church would love to have a healthy
Yeah,
grip of college students. If you have college students, first of all, they make your church look cool,
yeah,
right? If you
yeah,
show up and there's a lot of
right,
college students, you're like,
right,
this is a cool church. I
yeah,
remember when I was in Portland, there was like three churches
right,
that all of us went to, right? Like
yeah,
there's just three of them, and
yep,
there's tons of churches in Portland,
yeah, hundreds
but as
that don't
far
have.
as like, but as far as like where you're going, so why is it from a church perspective? Because I maybe kind of go to that place when you were doing college age ministry for the
Hmm.
churches. Why is it that churches struggle so hard to reach college students?
Yeah, I think largely, I mean, you think of the function of life. College students need to find someone to get married to, and and
Yeah.
so if they're going to a church maybe with 100 or 150 people, and there's only a couple of people their age in college, it's going to be hard to find someone to marry, and it's going to be hard to have a friendship group. And so, and then you combine that with the fact that they're upwardly mobile, like they're able to go wherever they want, and so you do tend to have a couple churches that are the cool churches, one or two.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. Like it's good for the age group to have friends and to have community. That's a great thing. And I know both my kids have gone to some of those churches here in
Yeah.
town, and I'm happy for that on one level. On the other hand, college students have a lot of gifts, and a church that doesn't have college students, really is missing that part of the body. So it's I don't know if it's great for the church as a whole. It's probably good for the college students.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that is true. I love the super practical answer of
yeah,
they need to find someone to get married to.
yeah.
Like, and nobody wants to say that, but
No,
it's like,
right?
they're not going to come to your church
Yeah,
if, there's two other college age people and the college
right.
age people that are there oftentimes, you kind of said this a little bit earlier,
Yeah.
but sometimes the ones who stick around in churches, especially smaller church contexts, they have social, I
Yeah,
don't
they're
know how to
just
say
not
it.
not as strong socially. Yeah,
Yeah, they're
right.
not as strong socially, and so that makes them there for some reason. And so the ones who are strong socially, they all kind of find their spot
Yeah,
at a church,
yeah.
and so so that is really really interesting. One of the other things that I've thought about this as even our church is starting the discussion of what it would be
Sure.
to have a college age ministry. And I think this is gonna I don't know how else to say it, but it's gonna come out weird. But the transient nature
Oh yeah,
of
yeah.
of this year, and maybe you could
Right.
speak to that a little bit, Rob.
Yeah. So that's so by the way, I did a dissertation. I don't know if you remember, on early adults church participation and what
Yep.
drives them. And there's so many things just natural to the age that sort of militate against good healthy church. Like, for example, a lot of them nowadays, with tuition as much as it is, they have to have jobs, and even the students have to have jobs. And then, of course, when you're a young worker, you get all the worst shifts, so that causes them to have a really difficult time being consistent, because they have to be working, or they have to be Some of them have gone to school in different areas, and so they have to go home and see their family. And so you're
Yeah.
100% right. I mean, they're there some weeks and they're not there other weeks, and it's not a bad thing. It's not a flaw. It's not an inconsistency. It's just that's the stage of life they're at. They got to do this stuff,
And
but it of course makes it really difficult to give them a meaningful role in the church because you don't know if they're going to be around, and it also it makes it difficult to lead a group because it's a different group every week.
yeah. I mean, and I think that is one of the hardest things is just
Yeah.
how much that thing overturns.
Yeah.
And it just takes a really quality individual to first of all be able to not take that personally.
Yeah.
The
Right.
fact that you can't really get footing on
Yeah.
attendance.
Yeah.
And then to the place of, this is going to turn over, and I'm just going to whoever God brings through that door, I'm going to
Right.
minister to them.
Right.
And so I think that is a big piece of that. You talked about your dissertation there, and I do remember that. In fact, one of my questions was going to be to that, but this will segue perfectly into that. But before I ask that question, I always kind of want to hear, in my context and in my ministries, storytelling has been so huge. Whenever I teach, I tend to be more of a storyteller. I do videography on the side, which is just visual storytelling.
Right.
And so I think that always gives people a really good understanding of who we're talking to. So if you have a story, and I know it takes a second to kind of do this, so I'm going to stall
Sure.
and keep talking as you think of one, but maybe a story that literally sort of it encompasses what college age ministry is to you.
Okay.
So
Sure. Let me hit you.
So
Okay.
you already got it?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
do.
That's
Okay,
awesome.
so
Yeah.
a couple of years ago, so I've been teaching for a while, and of course we did college ministry when I was youth pastor for years. But then I was teaching at the university at Multnomah, and after a few years of teaching, I was kind of, I was ready for another challenge and a little bit of extra work, and so we started working with the college group at our church, big church, 3,000 people. And so the first, we started working on it, and we called the office and we said, hey, can we get a list of all the names of the college students? And they gave us a printout of 600 different early adults who had been to the church in the last year or two, and something. And this is awesome. We're going to kill this. Wow, 600.
Yeah.
And so we started planning. Bought a bunch of food, and I don't know, had got a worship team going, and of course high powered preaching. And we started advertising it, and I think the first week we had like 11, and I was like, oh man, it's not so good. So I thought, okay, well, let's keep working on it. And we were plugging away, and it was getting a little bit bigger, and so it was, unfortunately, we were starting right around the summer, and so I thought, well, let's do some work. And so I thought, let's move it to my house for a bit, and everyone can get to know us. So we were getting ready for this event at our house, this college and career night, and we had a barbecue, and I got a bunch of food, and then I actually made a mini golf course for everybody, and then I set up an outdoor projector in worship, and I thought this is gonna be great. And then back then we had a golf cart, so I got the mower out and I mowed a course into the field behind our house, and something. And this is gonna be a great night. This is gonna be a lot of fun. And so we started waiting. This is gonna sound bad, this story. I started waiting for people to come, and I got a couple calls from leaders. Yeah, I can't make it. I can't make it. I'm like, uh-oh.
Oh no.
And then, so the first person showed up. About an hour early, and it was, I think, like a 19-year-old girl and her mom. And so her mom said, "Hey, she's got some social anxiety. Is it okay if I stay for the night?" And I'm like, "Okay, come on in."
College.
And then,
All right.
and then another dude who was struggling with some stuff showed up, and then we had one leader that was good, and then another dude showed up, and the leader said, "Yeah, he's undergoing he's having a pedophilia case right now." And so by the end of the night, I think we had like 9 people or something like that, and again, everybody's important. Like folks without strong social skills are important, and God loves them, and they need to be a big part of our group. But it is nice to have like some other folks there too to kind of smooth things out, and some leaders. And so at the start, so by the end of the night, I was thinking, what am I doing? Like I'm like, come on, I'm like a big deal in youth ministry. I'm not. I spent like 30 hours on this event. I got 9 people. I'm like, this stinks. And so I was ready to give up. But then we were like, no, we can't do that. We got to stay with it. And we stayed with it. And college ministries grow if you stay with them, if you can be patient. And a few months later, we were significantly up, had a good, healthy group that was coming together. And so it takes time, and there's frustration along the way.
Yeah. Man, I think that every youth worker can relate to that.
Yeah.
Man, I put way too much time into this
Right.
event,
Right.
feeling, and then have the low outcome on the other side of that. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's it, right? Like one of the hard things I think about college age ministry is that even though college people bring a lot of hype
Yeah.
with them, it actually isn't hype that attracts them. Strangely enough, like it's a strange kind of mix there.
Yeah.
Like some people are, but you know, at least maybe when I was in college, it was like maybe it's a different version of hype. Maybe it's remarketed hype, but
Yeah,
it's more
so
like authenticity. You know,
this is really tricky. Now, this is a really good point you're bringing up. Like, okay, so when I was back in the day, I was teaching introduction to church ministry, and so I had a couple hundred students, all the freshmen every year at Multnomah, and so I got them to do a paper called the Church Quest, and say go out to your church, and then come back and write, try different churches because they're new in town, and then write me like a 3-page paper on your impressions of the different churches. And so I read quite a few hundred of these, and it was absolutely fascinating. And you're dead right that in one sense, they say, yeah, we don't like the hype, and we don't like, they say, oh, we don't like the data projectors and the showy, we don't like any of that stuff. In fact, some folks talked about even they couldn't go to a church because it felt wrong how much the church spent on its stage or on its sound system. And so you're thinking, well, that's cool.
Yeah.
But then the skeptic in me wonders if some of that stuff is just assumed. Like, so everybody talks a pretty good game with, we don't care about sound system and fancy worship, but there's some pretty old school churches with none of that have 0 college students. So it's hard to know if that's what's the word, aspirational. Some of those. Although it is partly true, like I'm not saying it isn't true. You get college students. If college students worship, a lot of times they keep the band pretty simple, and it's not a big showy thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyways, it's hard to get to know exactly what's going on with that.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating too, because I feel like it's just hidden better at the more trendy churches. Like it looks a lot more simple on stage, but it's still a $100,000 sound system that's rocking that.
There's still a lot of good looking people in the room. Like it's. Anyways,
yeah, that's absolutely true. Yeah, it's absolutely true, man. And,
nothing wrong with that.
I guess that's the one of the hard things about youth ministry. I think the Young Life guys understand this, but it is hard to build a youth ministry without a certain type of personality in the room. And I think that kind of goes to, if you start with kind of the social outcast, it really takes a long time to get that thing working. However, if you start with a couple quality, extroverts, it doesn't take much at that point after you get those people in the door. But yeah, let's ask that question now. And I know that this is why I add this on here, because I know this is a passion of yours, and this is really what you wrote your dissertation on. But why do students leave church during their college years?
Oh yeah, sorry, I lost you for a second, TJ. It was that, why do students leave church during their college years?
Yep, that's exactly right.
Okay. No, that's a great question, and a lot has been written on it. First of all, there's tons and tons of books. I'm going to be honest. I think sometimes the problem is overstated. Like, that is to say, everybody says, "Oh, the world's ending. The young people are all leaving the church," and that's a good line to sell books. And so a lot of. Now, again, there is a problem. I'm not saying there isn't, but some of the numbers that get thrown around are crazy. If you were to believe some of these 80 and 90% of the kids are leaving church, there shouldn't be any Christians at this point, statistically, and yet there are. So anyways, so a grain of salt with all of that. And I got to tell a quick story here. My friend Ron Mars at Western Seminary, he thought he'd do a checkup because everyone for quite a long time was throwing around the stat 88% of young people leave Christianity after high school. And so he tried to get to the bottom of, well, who's everybody quoting with this 88%? And he tracked it back, and finally he found out that it was a denominational meeting somewhere in the South. And basically it was a bunch of youth pastors got together and said, well, how many kids come to your youth group? And they took the total number. And then they said, how many come to your college ministry? And then they did a ratio there, and that's how they figured out that 88% left. And so obviously that's ridiculous.
That's a solid study right there.
It's the worst social science ever done. Like, I mean, there's 100 reasons, right? It could be not a college town, or again, young adults don't need a college group as much as a high school. There's just 100 reasons. Anyways, so it is a bit sketch.
And also in there really quick, just like the idea of, just because they don't come back to your church doesn't mean they're not. It doesn't mean that they're
right.
they left the church,
right? If they're all in the three cool churches or whatever.
Yeah, and so okay. All right,
so I'm not saying that there isn't a problem. There is a problem, and I think it's probably multifaceted. There's a lot of different opinions. I'll throw out a couple. I'll tell you what I think. I think part of it statistically is, I think, when you have all these cool youth groups. There's probably some kids that are coming out that maybe haven't completely bought into Christianity, but it's kind of a group thing. And so then as soon as the group is no longer there, so in some ways, like, for example, one of the youth groups I had, we had, I don't know, a couple hundred kids coming out to the high school group. They had maybe 17 in second grade and 14 in first grade. And then suddenly get this big, huge jump. Well, if if you've gained, I don't know, 100 or 150 extra kids, and then you lose half of them, you're still quite a bit bigger than the other. So there's some statistical stuff there, but let's assume for a minute that there is a problem. I think it comes down to parenting and kids being a little bit spoiled and selfish. Like you don't want to go to church, and you're kind of like, well, I'm not going to go because I don't want to go. It's sort of what we do nowadays. There's probably a part of it that's tied to the fate of Christianity in America and Canada. Like we're sort of on the downtrend, and so there was a generation before us that was willing to kind of play church and pretend to be kind of socially acceptable Christian, even though maybe it didn't really mean a lot to them. And then the kids come along and they're like, no, I'm not going to play that. So that's probably part of it. I've talked a little bit in my classes about something called conditioned egocentrism. And what that would be, what I'm suggesting is, sometimes, if youth ministry is done badly, we put all this attention on the young people and we plan, maybe we give youth services, we make youth services for them. And so we give them sermons that are their type, and then we have worship that's their type, and announcements, and everything's designed for them: food, the space, the mission trips. And so they go to church, and this is their experience with church. Now suddenly they hit, their first year of college, and their group scatters. Maybe they go off somewhere new, and they walk into an adult service, and they're like, I don't like this. And it's almost kind of like we've conditioned an egocentrism in them, which would be a kind of a damning indictment for youth ministry if it's true.
Well, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. That man, that could be a whole podcast in and of itself. It could be a whole dissertation.
That's right.
Conditioned egocentrism. Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's not awesome. It's not awesome.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating to me as I'm even thinking about it right now.
You can even let me hit you. Like, so for example, I was watching the church I go to, a good church. We watched, we have a youth service in the church, and so there's a bunch of kids that they were going through the program, and they always liked it. Well, they hit college, and they're still in town, and some of their friends are gone, and so they come on Sunday morning, and so for the first year or two, they kept trying to sneak into the high school service, and eventually the youth pastor said, "No, you guys can't do this anymore." So they went over to the adult service, and they're like, "Yeah, we don't like that." And so what they ended up doing, a couple of them, is they would come every Sunday and then just hang out in the foyer, and they wouldn't go to any of the services, just be with the people. And at that point, man, if I ever write a college ministry book, it's going to be called Stuck in the Foyer.
Wow.
Between the two.
Holy cow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's a great title.
Yeah, it'd be a fun title.
I mean,
yeah.
TBD on the quality of the book, but it's a great title. It's a great title.
Yeah. I think it's one of the reasons why, like, I started off back in the day, I started loving the idea of a youth service on Sunday morning. And I remember starting one, and I had to convince the elders and the parents. And then when we got going, we did it for a couple of years, and then I realized, man, I don't want to do this. We can get like twice as many kids in the midweek, and kids are more excited in the evening to do stuff. We're putting all this effort into a Sunday morning service, and really they should be with the adults. Yeah. So I tried to get it canceled, and I almost couldn't get it canceled because the parents liked it so much. The parents are like, "Hey, my kid's making us come home early from vacation to get to your service," and it's kind of like the McDonald's effect. Like if the kids like the toys, the adults will go there. And so So now I'm going here, but anyways, it's almost kind of like sometimes natural selection doesn't help the church. And so you've got the churches that do youth services. Parents are going to like them, and parents are going to like them because kids like them. But then I kind of wonder if we're shooting ourselves in the foot, because they have no connection to the adults, and they're all separated in this thing. And then again, they leave the youth service eventually, and then they leave church.
Yeah.
And I mean, the church got big because all the parents brought their kids, but in the end, if we lose all the young people, we're not helping ourselves.
Yeah, it seems like one of those situations where the short term effect is blinding you to the long term condition of what you're kind of doing there, and that really is a fascinating thing. And actually, I remember you talking about that my first year at Multnomah, and you will be proud, Rob. I've never started a Sunday morning youth service ever, and whenever everybody says that, I go, no, I already know where that goes, so I'm not going down that route.
Yeah,
so we've stayed on the midweeks and the evenings.
The older I get, the more I don't like it. Like, and again, I know a lot of churches do them, and it's a popular thing. But man, you've probably heard, TJ, about like anytime youth men academics all get together, they talk about the one-eared Mickey Mouse. I don't know if that's they always talk about how like in North America, youth groups have become like a one-eared Mickey Mouse. Like you got the church, the big circle, and then off to the edge, you got like the youth group. And it's sort of disconnected, and that goes back to maybe the problem too. Like if none of our kids have relationships with the adults, so the Sunday morning thing is a huge part of that problem, I think.
Oh man, it's just all super interesting to even think about right now, and I think one of the hard things about being a youth minister and really I think why people listen to this show is that you kind of feel like you're on the fringe of youth of church culture, like you are running this program inside of a bigger program, and your needs when you put them on the maintenance guys stuff, they go right to the bottom, and when your tech stuff goes down, IT guys are looking at you like, hey, we got other things we got to do first. And so I think that's one of the hard things, because there's it built into it, without the conditioned egocentrism, without all the thoughts around it, built into youth ministry is this sort of, it wants to satellite off, and so I think it takes a really strong individual to say, we really want to align ourselves. We really want to align ourselves with what the church is doing, and a youth pastor who can rally the troops to something that's not his own. And I guess that's a weird thing to say, or her own. It's a weird thing to say like that, but there is this thing that's so healthy when it's done right, and I've seen it done right here in my context now. But when you align your students to the bigger church, and when they can step into the bigger church seamlessly, because they know, hey, this is the church I go to, and there's no difference between, there's difference in programming, but there's no difference in heart between these two programs. And I think that's really hard to find. I think that kind of floats around a lot of these other these questions that kind of go out there. So real quick, and all that stuff's really great.
Sure.
I wanted to share just a quick story.
Yeah, do.
That involves me and you. So gosh, this probably was your second year teaching.
Yeah.
Because it was my second year at Multnomah.
Sure.
And you came in 2008. Am I right about that?
2005.
2005. So I graduated in 2008. Sorry.
There we go.
Yes, 2005 was my first year at college. Okay. And so this would have been 2006, maybe 2007.
Sure.
Somewhere right in there. We go on this mission trip, right? And let's just say this.
Yeah.
You've improved the mission trips substantially since I've been there. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Substantially. Now you're taking people to Europe. Okay. So it was way cooler. But you took us to Canada, right?
Salmon Arm.
And that's your home country. So we're going up to Canada to serve at this youth retreat.
Yeah.
And I play hockey.
Oh, there we go.
I played hockey growing up quite a bit.
Okay.
And I remember playing on some of these traveling teams, and every once in a while we'd play a Canadian team, and they would just smoke us, because everyone in Canada plays hockey. I mean, literally, there's just so many good players that come out of there. And as far as population goes, they're just disproportionately sending so many people to the NHL.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the story. We're playing just some pickup floor hockey in the gym up there, and I scored a goal.
Yeah.
And I scored a goal on the 5-hole, which is, a pretty great moment, right?
Beautiful place to score.
And it is a great place to score.
Yeah.
But But I got pretty excited about that, Rob. and it was kind of a joke, but it wasn't a joke. And I put my shirt over my head, and sort of ran around with sort of an airplane thing going on.
Yeah, right.
And I thought what I was doing was hilarious, right?
Yeah.
Until I stopped, took my thing off, and these Canadian teenagers look terrified. I mean, they don't know what just happened. Like, what did this guy just do? And to this day, I feel so embarrassed every time I think
there
of
are
that
subtle
story.
differences between the countries. Oh, you know what's even better though is when, I don't know if, do you remember when we were driving in the van?
You told me about this recently.
Oh, okay.
I'd forgotten this, but go ahead and tell that story.
Okay, well, so we're driving there. And so this is, by the way, this mission trip was a $10 mission trip. So I felt pretty good about the price of that.
Oh, yeah.
Anyways, we jump in the van. We're going out to this camp. And we go through Salmon Arm. And I'm telling you guys about how, Canadians sometimes a little more understated. Generally in a restaurant, you don't want to make too much noise and stuff like that. And so you put the window down, and as we're driving through the city, and you go, "Canadians, we're here to evangelize you," or something like that. I was like, shit. Oh, it was pretty funny.
Oh man, there you go, man. It is.
But that's what Canadians love about Americans is, Americans they got the confidence and the courage. I really think the two countries work well together.
Oh yeah. It is. They always work really well together. In fact, some of my biggest mentors, including you, have been Canadian.
Oh.
So they're super, super compatible. But yes, I.
That's funny though with the after celebrating.
Oh man, I think about that too much and think, oh, what a big.
You're thinking soccer,
and that was it. That was my that was the end of my missionary career. The Lord did not call me to anywhere else but America. Surprise. And so that kind of meant that I was going to be a youth pastor here in the States. But anyway, Rob, thank you for coming on here.
Yeah, for sure.
This has been awesome. You are the first doctor we have had on the show, which Reverend is great. So Reverend Doctor.
Yeah, that's right.
So you have raised the quality of our show immensely. And usually, guys who are listening out there, you would have to pay a pretty penny to hear this guy talk. I mean, you'd have to be taking out a loan
Big money.
to hear him speak normally. So we're going to give you this content for free.
There we go.
But I do want to say this, and actually, Rob, you didn't want me to promo anything for you, but I want to do it anyway.
Okay.
But I do want to say that, Multnomah University is a great university. I love it. I love my education there. I love it so much I got back and got a master's degree from there. So
there we go.
And so I've loved every piece of it. And now Rob is not just doing undergraduate stuff, but you're doing master's level and doctorate level stuff. So if you can actually become a doctor in youth ministry.
It's true.
What a world we live in that you can do that. And the church will pay you exactly the same amount for that. So that was a bad promo. I'm sorry, Rob.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, no, it's awesome. If you're looking for a college, I definitely check them out, and
that's
and
cool.
Maybe even write an email to Rob. I'm sure he would respond to that. So it's really cool.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, DJ. It's fun to be on.
All right, you're listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Fringe Youth Worker Podcast. Don't believe anything my dad